place on Earth has better weather.
This tropical update is brought to you by Rayovac.
Well, thanks for tuning in on this Saturday morning. I'm Rick Griffin here with Will Ann, and it's time for the tropics. And we have a new tropical storm in the Pacific. It's Tropical Storm Olaf, 14.2 north, 94.9 west. That puts the center 135 miles south of the Mexican coastline. Maximum winds up to 70 now. So Olaf is a strengthening tropical storm and is forecast to become a hurricane before it makes landfall in southern Mexico sometime overnight tonight, maybe early Sunday morning. Pressure continues to come on down as the storm strengthens. 997 millibars now, 29.44 inches of mercury. Well, despite the fact that Olaf is a tropical storm, because of the forecast for an increase to hurricane strength, a hurricane warning has been issued along the Mexican coastline from Tapachula to Punta Maldonado, as you can see. Let's look at the colorized satellite. As you can see, it appears that Olaf is strengthening as we have a very cold central dense overcast here. Very, very cold, very tall clouds into the atmosphere. The higher up they are, the colder the cloud tops. So an immense cluster of thunderstorms here, and the center's probably fairly close to the middle of the CDO, or the central dense overcast in here. Conditions are favorable aloft with high pressure over this region, and sea surface readings are plenty warm enough for intensification. Steering currents again should continue to bring Olaf towards the Mexican coastline, where it will make landfall again sometime overnight tonight or early on Sunday. After that, track is a little bit of a question mark, but the latest forecast indicates that Olaf may cross Mexico and come back out in the Bay of Campeche as a tropical storm sometime early next week. After that, the track is certainly even more uncertain than between now and Monday afternoon, but we'll watch it for you. As we head to the Atlantic side, here's the Western Gulf, looking good this morning. In fact, it's down in the mid-50s around Houston with a dry continental air mass in this area, so no worries at this point for tropical stuff in Texas. But over Florida, it's tropical. It's not a tropical system, although it's tropical wave here, but it's more like tropical moisture that's been a weather headache, because as it's drawn northward on the upper level winds, it's been interacting with a weak cold front in here and a series of upper disturbances that are rotating around an upper low, which is over Alabama. So that scenario has been triggering some heavy downpours in the Sunshine State, like a 10 to 12 inch rainfall amount or two in west central Florida recently. And there's more moisture to come. That'll be one of our weather headlines today, the continuing soaking rains for those of you in the state of Florida. Let's go east. A couple features for you. One is an upper level low here. Some storms being enhanced a little on the northeast side of that upper low. Tropical wave in this vicinity, and there's weak high pressure aloft. Notice the high clouds fanning out away from the system anticyclonically, indicating weak high pressure aloft here. We'll watch that area. But as we head to the eastern Atlantic, the bottom line is, take a look at the high clouds. There they go, sweeping off towards the northeast. That indicates westerly winds in the high levels, and an environment that is unfavorable for tropical development at this time. So we go to the mid-Pacific, and what do we have here? This is Super Typhoon Ginger. Max winds 165 miles per hour. That's sustained winds. Gusts are higher than that. Ginger's moving north-northwest and is expected to become caught in the jet stream winds and perhaps rapidly become extratropical during the next 24 hours. Right now, in a very impressive typhoon, and we have a tropical cyclone that's affected Bangladesh. They have a news story here with high winds, extremely heavy rains in the Delta region in that particular country, which is sometimes affected by these cyclones this time of the year and cause a lot of flooding and other damage. So keep you posted on that. So stay with us. We've got much more coming up, including your local forecast, and then, of course, at the top of the hour, Weather Scope.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
Just 10 minutes before the hour. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bruce Edwards. This is Cheryl Lemke, and it's time for the tropics. And I'll tell you, we got another powerful tropical storm in the Pacific threatening the coast of Mexico, and hurricane warnings, I understand, have already been posted.
That's right. And besides that, too, there's another disturbance that's farther out towards the Atlantic, and we'll have more details about that shortly. But first of all, let's check out Tropical Storm Olaf. Again, a very powerful tropical storm in the East Pacific, just off the west central coast there of Mexico. And it's still classified as a tropical storm, but if it were to get up winds with 74 miles an hour or higher, then it would be classified as a hurricane. So again, right on the verge now becoming possibly a hurricane. And in fact, it is under a fairly favorable environment, and the forecast does call for further strengthening. So this could become a hurricane a little bit later on today. Now it has slowed down with its forward speed somewhat. Now it's only moving at speeds of 7 miles an hour, but it is moving to the north-northwest. Now again, because it is expected to intensify, possibly becoming a hurricane, hurricane warnings have already gone up for portions of southwestern Mexico from Punta Maldonado and running southward toward Tapachula. So again, this is an area under a hurricane warning. Already we've had some very heavy rains pounding this region, and we'll likely see more very squally conditions persisting for today. Now, as you can see from our latest satellite picture, the convection probably not as intense as what we had earlier this morning, but nonetheless still some very bright shades of oranges and reds. And that is showing us the higher and the colder cloud tops, which in turn reflects where the heavier downpours are occurring. So again, heavy rain has already worked its way inland right here over parts of southwestern Mexico, so certainly some very stormy conditions throughout this region. Now, it's still rather uncertain where the hurricane will actually go inland and where it should go after that. We're still kind of up in the air regarding that, but some of the official forecasts kind of indicate and hint at the fact that this tropical system may work its way across Mexico and then eventually possibly reemerge over the Bay of Campeche. So it's something that we'll certainly have to watch very closely. One thing though for certain though, as this does eventually spread over Mexico, it will bring some tremendous amounts of rain. It's not uncommon for some of these tropical systems to produce 5 to 10 inches worth of rain. So flooding will also be of utmost concern over portions of Mexico throughout the day today. Currently, though, as we head over towards the western Gulf and across the Bay of Campeche, it's very quiet. That is not the case, though, across the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Extensive cloud cover. There's a low-pressure system coming in across Florida. It has been producing some flooding downpours for much of west central and southwestern Florida. We also have a broad area of cloudiness, too, across the western Caribbean. It's poorly organized, but nonetheless, there are some showers and thunderstorms popping up at this time. And more areas of concern, too, farther out across the Caribbean and across the Atlantic. Currently an upper-level low poised near Hispaniola, producing some showers and storms. There's also a disturbed region, too, just east of the Lesser Antilles. These are generally pulling off towards the west. Now, what we have to be concerned about is the fact that the winds are not that terribly strong in this region. And because the wind shear has relaxed somewhat, there is a potential, it may be rather slight, but there is a potential maybe for some development here. So we'll have to watch these areas rather closely. Farther out towards the Atlantic, though, we have some very strong westerly winds, strong westerly wind shear taking place. So systems would have a very hard time developing here, and the same too can be said off the African coast. Tropical disturbances coming off the coast, but they're encountering some very strong wind shear. Now, of greater importance is a super typhoon in the West Pacific. This is Super Typhoon Ginger, still packing winds well over 165 miles an hour, a very powerful, a very dangerous super typhoon. The good news with this, though, is that it's not affecting any land areas. It's currently churning up the open waters, a broad, immense tropical system here. But we eventually think it's going to be recurving towards the northeast, eventually turning over some cooler waters. And so we'll gradually start to weaken somewhat as we go along in time. But right now, it's a super typhoon, and you can clearly pick out the eye of Ginger right there. So again, a big, immense storm system out here across the West Pacific. And lastly, we head a little bit farther towards the west, and in the last 24 hours, a tropical cyclone came on shore near Bangladesh. We don't have any official reports of rainfall, but undoubtedly some very heavy rains have broken out here and some serious flooding as well. Bruce?
Thanks very much, Cheryl, and thank you very much for joining us here on WeatherScope. Get a close look at one of the most successful storm chasers ever. Watch the profile of Warren.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
All right, let's take a look at the tropics for you and see what's going on. We have a tropical storm in the eastern Pacific and a super typhoon in the West Pac, Super Typhoon Ginger. First, though, Tropical Storm Olaf. You'll notice the coordinates as of 2 p.m. Pacific time, 80 miles south of Santa Cruz. Here's the Gulf of Tehuantepec. This can be an infamous area during the winter season when strong highs drop into the Gulf of Mexico. The air gets accelerated, funneled through some of the local mountainous terrain, and we end up with incredibly strong winds. Do you know that you can get 80 to almost 100-mile-per-hour winds with some of the more extreme events coming down into the Gulf of Tehuantepec? But in this case, it's tropic, so 50-mile-per-hour sustained. Now, that's a big drop from that previous sustained of 70. And the system really has not shown a lot of indication today that it is intent on intensifying. Northbound at 8 miles per hour with the estimated pressure there at the bottom of your screen, 996 millibars. Now, we do have, not hurricane, but tropical storm warnings in effect. Same location, it's just that the hurricane warning has been replaced by this tropical storm warning from Punta Maldonado southeast along the coast down to Tapachula. Again, those are tropical storm warnings. And the satellite imagery, now we know that upstairs, 30 to 40,000 feet above the Pacific, we do have a southeast to a southerly flow of air. So we do get that shearing effect to some extent. The winds are not very strong, but perhaps just strong enough. A lot of the convection or the intense vertical rising air motion has been going on up here to the north of where the actual low-level center is. Again, this is the outline of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, and we do expect the system to continue that jog to the north and make landfall within the next 12 to 18 hours. Very heavy rain bands and gusty winds expected, and the rain could be a problem locally because of too much. In other words, all this tropical air getting squeezed up into the hilly terrain, and the result could be widespread heavy rain and some flooding. Now, here's the upper pattern sitting over this zone, and again, as I mentioned, you can see that arrow going to the north. Southerly flow here producing some of the shearing effect. Big trough in the Gulf upstairs, and a very thin or narrow wedge of high pressure over the Western Caribbean. Now, earlier in the week, we were looking at the Western Caribbean for signs of potential development coming into this weekend. The ridge, the upper winds were becoming more favorable. However, we haven't really had any definitive area of low pressure, an area of circular motion downstairs to actually concentrate the developing showers and the storms. But what we have had is a huge plume of tropical air going into Florida. You'll see that in a moment. From the islands east, prevailing west winds up top, so shearing produced on top of these tropical waves. And we do have an upper low near Hispaniola. So there will be a flare-up of showers and thunderstorms with that upper low. But check out the plume from east of the Yucatan all the way up across Florida, and it's within that conveyor belt of very tropical air that we've had the heavy rainfall, but no tropical development per se, just a fairly long fetch of tropical air. Notice the high clouds tracing out the air motion here, dropping down across the Bahamas and just kind of sliding all the way down across central Cuba, with the motion here going up towards the north. So you've got this very sharp delineation between the northerly and then the southerly flow. But again, no tropical storms developing, but just way too much moisture focused over the same area for way too long. Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, a couple of storms, heavy rain, and then the upper level low pressure spinning this way. High clouds kind of tracing out the airflow to the east. And then as we head east of the islands, again, more blow off of these high clouds, a little bit of a tropical wave with showers and storms getting closer to the islands, pretty far to the south. And then a big expanse of clouds cutting across the Atlantic, but not a lot of organization seen at this time in this cloud pattern. But there is here with the Super Typhoon Ginger. Now, the maximum sustained winds have been dropped down to about 155 miles an hour. Moving northwest, expected to turn to the north and then go out to the northeast. Do the big hook that we see with a lot of systems in the northern hemisphere as they start to feel the effects of the prevailing stronger westerly wind flow to their north and their west. So hopefully this will just curve on out without any major problems for folks in the western Pacific. But we do have problems stateside with the heavy rain in Florida.
The Weather Check. No place on Earth has better weather.
This
This tropical update is brought to you by Lowe's Home Improvement Warehouse. When it comes to home improvement, Lowe's knows.
Thanks for joining us here at the Weather Channel. I'm Paul Lemick with Charles McCray, our director this hour. Let's talk about some activity in the tropics. It's time for the tropical update at 10 till every hour. We'll keep you on top of all the tropical happenings. In the Pacific, one of the biggest happenings now is weakening a bit. Tropical storm Olaf, look at its current position there, 15.0 north, 94.5 west. 90 miles south-southeast of Salina Cruz, Mexico. Winds sustained around 50 miles per hour as of its last position. And the last look at it there, nearly stationary, the movement, so not much of that. Estimated pressure at 29.53 inches of mercury. That's around 1,000 millibars. Okay, here's the deal in Olaf. It is at least part of the circulation is interacting with land. As part of the circulation does interact, it helps to kind of weaken the storm a bit. It's not moving a lot now. If it hangs out here and doesn't really move on to the shore, fully onto the shore, it could allow that as it holds off here a bit, it could maintain some intensity for a while as it kind of slowly goes down, but not real fast unless it moves all the way onto land. But it is having kind of a weakening effect on it. Despite all of this, there's still tropical storm warnings in effect, bear that in mind, from Punta Maldonado to Tapachula. So anywhere in these ranges, that's where the coastal problems are most affected by the effects of the tropical storm, with the warning intact there. Well, let's look at this. You can see here that, again, it's part of the circulation, counterclockwise flow, is, as I mentioned, interacting with land. If it just kind of moves as it does and moves slowly northward and does kind of meander around the land, most forecast models show that it would kind of move north and northwest and kind of fall apart. One in forecast model indication is that it could move across and move into the Bay of Campeche and reemerge as a system that could be affecting the Gulf of Mexico, could be alive and well there. A lot of problems with that potentially as it moves across the higher terrain in this region. As you take something like that, take a batch of moisture, you push it up, orographic effect takes over. Things are cooled adiabatically. The squeeze happens to the moisture, and the moisture gets wrung out. Best way to put it is gets wrung out. That's what happened with the remains of Nora in western Colorado yesterday. Same thing could happen. It'd be a long trek for this thing to make it over the Bay of Campeche, but it'll be watched just in case that would happen. Otherwise, kind of wiggling north and northwestward, and just rain, the primary threat from Olaf and what's left of it. Toward the Atlantic now, we'll have a look there. One of the spots we look at so much this time of the year, although it's kind of getting kind of late in the Cape Verde season, kind of not much expected from here. Pre-existing spin, some storms that do move off the coast. Have to have favorable upper-level conditions to survive the long trek. That's one of the spots we look at. These winds are the 200 millibar level, about 40,000 feet way up in the air. And these don't really push the storms around so much as they create a favorable or unfavorable area for their development. The westerly's too strong here, ripping or shearing a system apart. Some spots you may see just a bit of high pressure aloft, which allows the system underneath it to spin up, a more favorable environment for that. We've been watching one spot in particular that did at one point look like it might have been an interesting spot for development, Northwest Caribbean. Nothing really looks like is going to be happening here. Things aren't real favorable for it at the present time. That stream of moisture, not a tropical system, but tropical moisture, has been pushing into Florida. And that's why we've been dealing with so much rain that has been popping through here. Looking elsewhere across the Caribbean, not a lot happening. Again, no real major areas of convection that really show any potential. Winds aloft just aren't real favorable for it right now. For perspective, there's the coast of South America, a number of waves, but nothing really showing much promise at the present time. I mentioned the pre-existing spin and one of the spots that comes from the Cape Verde Islands. Again, upper-level conditions not favorable for the continual development. Let's look now at Typhoon Ginger. Pretty amazing system right there, but it's kind of on the downhill run, moving north, and currently moving north around 10 miles an hour. 132-mile-an-hour sustained winds. A little while ago it was Super Typhoon Ginger on 155. The weakening has begun. It looks like as it continues its northward trek, it's going to run into all this motion here and kind of be taken northeastward into much cooler water, and the weakening will continue. So that's Typhoon Ginger. Look up it there, and it's going to be falling apart pretty rapidly. Doesn't really look like it's going to be much of a threat to land anywhere. As we look at a lot of action across the country,